I am so hopped up on NyQuil right now, it is unbelievable. But just the same, I'm going to do my best to answer your Linuxy questions. Maybe that'll make it more entertaining. Who knows? Here's how this show works. You ask me questions via a variety of medium. Linuxy questions, free software-y things, open sourcey things, stuff of that ilk. And then I attempt, however feebly, to give you an adequate response. This is Linux Thursday, and this is what we do here. Brought to you in part by Pogo Linux, who has Linux right in the domain name, and I believe says the word Linux about 11 million times on their website. They are phenomenal. They make amazing workstations. They customize really killer servers, big storage servers, all sorts of things. Go on over to pogolinux.com and just spec something out. It's fancy. You can't really go wrong with that. The first question, and I'm actually organizing these questions into blocks today based on where they came from. The first batch of questions were submitted via Telnet into my 1990s, early 1990s era BBS that, yes, is fully operational if you Telnet into it at bbs.lunduke.com. Oh yeah, people post questions for this show produced in 2019 and posted on YouTube and all sorts of various other places using literally DOS-based BBS software that they telnetted into. That right there should win this show a spot on the Internet Hall of Fame, which is, I think, a real thing. The question from can't pronounce your name, buddy. Newton Send. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce that name. I bet it's rad when you say it, though. Newton Send says, I'm in the process of de-big brotherifying my life. That is a fantastic word. De-big brotherifying. I like it. And good goal. But I'm looking for a preferably free, preferably self-hosted replacement for Google Drive, Docs, and Sheets. I'm with you, man. Honestly, this is a big problem for a lot of people because the reality is the most insidious thing that Google ever did was make a couple of really high quality services that work really well. It's the worst. I mean, if Google Docs and Google Drive and Google Sheets, like Google Docs especially seems to be a big problem for people. If it sucked, there would be no problem. We would just be like, well, whatever, it stinks. It doesn't work that well or it's unreliable. We'll just move off to whatever else we can do. We'll just scratch things down on little scrolls and just tie them to pigeons and hope they eventually come back. It'd be better than that. But no, it's actually a really good service that they provide, at least for the most part, for free. That's the problem with it, is you end up so enticed by such a well-functioning service that you become willing to give up so much of your personal privacy and ownership over your own data. It's insidious of them. Those evil people did such a good job making their products. It's drives me crazy. Newton Send continues, a thing where I can store files and create and share documents and edit them together with others. Any suggestions? Yes, I have suggestions, and there's one suggestion that jumps out beyond all others, and that is Nextcloud, without a doubt. Nextcloud, I think it's just nextcloud.com, is phenomenal. It's based on OwnCloud. It's a fork of OwnCloud, but it's a fork of OwnCloud that was forked by the guy that made OwnCloud. There was a whole bunch of brouhaha with the OwnCloud company, and there was some problems, and so the guy just left. The guy named Frank, totally awesome guy, leaves OwnCloud, the company and project he founded, to go start Nextcloud to do it better. It's 100% free software, top to bottom, which OwnCloud is not. That's an important distinction, I think. It's mostly free software, but it's not 100%. Nextcloud is 100% free software. It does the file syncing stuff fantastically. I use it here. I have a local Nextcloud server that I don't really use a whole lot, but I have a remote Nextcloud server that I use a ton. That's where I do my document collaboration. It's got fantastic online document collaboration stuff that even works well nowadays on like Android devices and whatnot. It has really come a long ways. In the last like 6 months alone, it has come a long ways. It's got video and audio chat services built in. It has realistically everything you're looking for at this point. Moving away from Google Docs to a Nextcloud based system is a no-brainer nowadays. The downside is you either are going to need to find a host that does Nextcloud hosting for you and then pay them, or you're going to need to find a server somewhere like a VPS or something like that and set up and administer your own Nextcloud instance, which admittedly is pretty simple if you've done any sort of server setup in the past. It's really not too bad, and there's lots of tutorials around it. Or you need your own server running that you can administer locally. So that is going to be a roadblock for a lot of people. Because with Google, it's just there. It's just being Google, and you just sign in and it's done. So there is that. Now, however, you want something free and self-hostable. So you are already realizing that that is going to be an issue. Highly recommend Nextcloud. So terribly highly. It is absolutely phenomenal. If you don't want to go with something big like that, and because Nextcloud is big, you got to run a big Apache and PHP and everything else, and so there's a lot to run there. So that means there's a lot to administer and potentially a lot to make sure you stay up to date and keep patched and keep secure. So if you're not up for doing that, or if you just want to be real old school about it, one other way you can go is not use that functionality. Hear me out. I love online document collaboration with a handful of people. Like, there's been many instances where it's been incredibly handy. However, humanity existed without such functionality for about 4 or 5 years, I believe. In humanity's total history, there's been a couple of years, maybe more than that, might be underselling it, where we just didn't have that, right? I mean, we didn't have that from the dawn of time, since when people were banging on the monoliths all the way up until basically 2000 something, right? When Google Docs came around and we all became hooked on that sort of thing. So we didn't have that. And you know what? People still had IT jobs, still administered servers, still built software, still did podcasts and video shows and TV shows and wrote books and music and everything else. We didn't have that functionality before, and it was fine. Now, I like to be able to send documents around to people, send files to friends or collaborators to work on things. I find that it's actually more important for me and my workflow to be able to do that than to be able to do real-time document collaboration, because it's very rare that I'm actually editing a document in real time with someone else. Now, I know people who do that all day, every day. And for those people, I don't know what to tell you. But just simply having an HTML or a LibreOffice document, or just a plain text document that you just put on a server somewhere, have an SSH host somewhere, or an FTP, heck, and just have a script that just auto uploads it for you, and then they can go grab it and you can collaborate that way. I know that's old school. I know that's wicked old school, but it's totally doable. Another option is to, instead of go with Nextcloud, go with something like that for files, just like an FTP drop or something. Maybe do something like SSH, it's a little more secure, but something along those lines, and then just simply have like a wiki set up somewhere that you and your friends can edit, or your colleagues or coworkers. But if you don't want to go with all those random archaic Stone Age solutions, just grab Nextcloud, man. It works fantastically well. The second question that came into the BBS is from Vicky. Vicky asks, I often think about the internet apocalypse, IA, and how, me too, it literally is something I think about every day. And that's probably a sign of some health problems in the brain partments. And how we could rebuild the internet after it. In my thoughts, Linux is part of the rebuild, as are BBSs and ham radio. Yes, Vicky, preaching to the choir. How do you think we could survive the internet apocalypse? How can we prepare for it? All right, so this is a really big question. I'm gonna pick out just a couple of bits and pieces here, because I think there's a few fascinating bits. The first is I love the mention of the ham radio in here. BBS's, Linux, and ham radio is an amazing and super powerful set of features, set of things that you can bring, not features, but things you can bring together to create something that is more robust in terms of hard to take down and destroy than the current internet infrastructure we have. For example, you can transmit data over ham radio. It's totally doable. There are downsides to it, though. Now, see, if you do it over ham radio, that means how are people going to shut you down? I mean, it's much easier to take out a section of the internet just by a denial of service attack or just snipping a wrong wire, which we've seen literally multiple times this year alone, than it is to take out a range of wireless signals. But part of the downside of going with ham radio and to say use a ham radio BBS, right, to transmit data back and forth, files, messages, email, that sort of thing, totally works functionality wise. 100% works. It works. It's tried and true, tested technology that's been around a long time. And even though most people may not use it or may not know details about it, some people may not even know it's a thing, but it's tried and true. The problem is the speed. And ham radio aficionados, correct me if I'm wrong here, but last time I checked, and this was a long time ago, you could do data for BBSs on ham radio. But two problems. One, not encrypted, right? You're sending it over the air, and ham radio, we've decided we do not encrypt that. So it's not encrypted. The second thing is it's slow. We're not talking even 56K speed. We're talking, I don't remember the exact speed range, but it's not going to be far off from like old 2400 baud modems is basically what I'm saying here. And I could be off on this on what is doable, but it was like, I remember, no, it's got to be even slower than that. Now that I'm thinking about it, the last time I saw a demo of doing, of basically, sending data that way over ham radio, I mean, it was just text crawling across the screen. So it's slow, but it is doable, which means it would work for things like, email and messages. Probably not going to work for sending around this show. It's just probably not going to do it, though I could just broadcast this show that way. But I agree. I think that modular, little compartmentalized, self-sustained little items like BBS is connected to telephone lines, ham radios, whatever you can connect up to them is part of, as well as any internet that may or may not exist by that point, is a big part of how we go forward in an internet apocalypse scenario where the internet's just down. The other option to go with is take the best of what we have with the internet and make it somewhat local or regional. There's a project called Internet in a Box, and it's so cool. Basically, the idea is you set up a singular server, and you connect, and you have on that server basically, Wikipedia, messaging systems, video and voice chat systems, file sharing systems, all that sort of thing. So anyone who can get access to that server can log on and go nuts and basically have a little mini internet. You wouldn't obviously have 1 billion people on it, but you could, in theory, not just have it for your household, but for your neighborhood. You broadcast a strong enough Wi-Fi signal, and other people in the neighborhood could all hop on, and so you could literally have your whole block connecting to a server where you can communicate with each other in real time, share files with each other, have essentially you could have a social media sort of scenario, except it's just your neighborhood. And then if you wanted to get even fancier after that, go with a mesh Wi-Fi network. You're going to have speed problems and you're going to massive latency problems. But with a mesh Wi-Fi network where each Wi-Fi network is connecting to the next, each hotspot's connecting to the next, there's going to be lots of bottlenecks. It may not be great for streaming video from one end of the continent to the other, but for low latency for high latency communication, like sending emails and documents transfer and all those sorts of things, it would work wonderfully well. So I think really in the end, there becomes a two-pronged approach. What I envision personally, if the internet goes down entirely. What I would like to see is long-range ham radio options for sending long-range data as quickly as possible. Like I know not massive data speeds, but without having to wait for many hops. Like if you have a BBS, for example, you could have a message network. Old style BBS is where you dial them up with phone lines and connect to them with 56K or less modems. What they would do is they'd have these networks. FidoNet was one of the largest, if not the largest. And each BBS at the end of the night, or sometimes a few times per day, would call another BBS or multiple other BBSs and say, hey, got any new messages or files? Here's some I've got. And they start passing them around that way on regular intervals. And so you could get a message in email from, say, San Francisco to New York City, but it might take a couple days, which isn't instantaneous. Whereas ham radio, you could just broadcast and boom, you could get it over there that day, though at very low baud rates. So I think that's part of the solution. I think a BBS connected to phone lines, ham radio, any internet connection that may or may not exist, and then connect that up to an internet in a box server, let them share messages and files between each other, and I think, boom, you've got like 90% of what makes the internet great, in my opinion, right there and ready to go. And you get a mesh wireless network, maybe getting your whole city or your whole region, something along those lines. If you live in like the state of Washington, you could have Washington Net. And the further away you are from each other, it may get a little more latency and a little less speed, but you'd be able to communicate across the state. And I think that becomes a fairly realistic solution. There's downsides to all of that, but yeah, that's how I think we prepare for it, is by continuing those sorts of projects. Ham radio work, BBSs, moving the internet in a box type functionality forward. And whatever you do, just make sure you've got local copies of all your data, because when the internet goes down, you won't have access to Gmail and Google Drive anymore. Mikey on the BBS asks, are you planning on getting a Thelio? If so, that's the new desktop from System 76. If so, how would you spec it out? I'm interested in getting the base model with the Intel architecture and an RTX 2070. So the Thelio does look really cool. And here's System 76 used to be a sponsor of this show. Great people out there in Colorado. Love those guys tremendously. What I would say is this. I'm not going to get a Thelio myself, but it looks awesome. It's got like wood paneling on it. It's not wood paneling. It's like fake wood. It's real inlaid, like I believe it's walnut, and I think they have another option they can put on there. And it just looks really, really good. And what's really impressing me there is they're having an emphasis on open hardware and free software at as many levels in the hardware as they can do. And I love that. I love seeing the fact that there's more and more companies that are recognizing that this is important. You look at like Purism, who sponsors this show, System 76, who used to sponsor this show. They're both working along those lines diligently. And I love that. And that goes to show you the kind of people that agree with Brian on things. But they're doing a fantastic job on it. I'm not going to get a Thelio myself. And it's not because it doesn't look great. It's because I'm working with one of the other sponsors of the show, Pogolytics, on a different machine that, well, as cool as the Thelio looks, No, I won't be getting it from me. However, it does look great. It is worth checking out. They don't sponsor the show at all anymore. They're just good people, and they are pushing things forward. So it is worth checking out if you haven't already. It's not like a fully open hardware system at this point, but it's more open than most desktops you can get. And I think that's really something special. I want to see more companies moving down that line, because it's not just because I want to see more competition in the space, but because I want more people to have access to it, and I want it to become more of the norm. You and me, us, we think about these things. We think, okay, if I'm going to buy a phone and I want to make sure the baseband is separated from the processor, so the baseband CPU can't read what's in the contents of the main system memory, so I have a little more privacy. I want to make sure there's a little more, I want to make sure it's a free software stack. Like, these are things that you and me think about. So like with Purism, they're working on that. With System 76, you can see them working on that. There's companies that are working that way, but most people don't think to ask those questions. And so I love seeing more companies do it, because the more companies do it, that means even if people aren't asking those questions or thinking about those problems, they're going to get the benefits of it anyway, because of all the hard work that folks like this, Purism and Pogo and Lulzbot and System 76 and me and you and all of us together are doing in advancing forward, not just awareness of these problems and some of the software to help solve some of these problems, but actually shipping hardware that ships with free software or ships with open hardware designs. These are excellent things happening. So kudos to System 76 for working on that. But no, I won't be getting one. As we toggle into the next avenue that questions come in, this episode is brought to you in part by Lulzbot 3D printers. They love open hardware too. They also love open source and free software. They do sales of their 3D printers where sometimes they give like some of the proceeds to the Free Software Foundation. They just toss it on over. It's absolutely fantastic. Plus, their 3D printers are friggin' incredible. Going over to lulzbot.com, check them out, look through it. You'll probably agree with me on that. All right, so now that the BBS is out of the way, let's move over to Patreon. We've got a Patreon account that helps to kind of keep the lights on for the show, though, as many people have pointed out, does not manage to keep me in color, which is, I guess we just don't bring in enough money to fund this show in color. But if you go over to patreon.com/Brian Lunduke, you can post questions. Once a week, I ask everyone for questions for the week. And I'm never disappointed. They're always really good ones. I can never get to all of them. My apologies for all of those of you I can't get to, but I try my best. This one comes from Nathaniel. Question number 1. Nathaniel gets 2 questions this week. Number 1, how are you? I'm doing well, Nathaniel. Thank you for asking. Number 2, what is your opinion on people who spend a lot of time ricing their Linux installation? Have you ever done it? Okay, for those of you who aren't unfamiliar with the term, ricing basically means pimping your ride, so to speak, kind of, sort of. Spending lots of time on your system to tweak the way your desktop looks and acts and behaves, custom terminals, transparencies and backgrounds and little widgets over here that show little animated bouncy things that show you how much processor load you have, and that's ricing. It's some sort of a term. I believe it comes from imported is it Japanese cars, where people would pimp them out and put like things on them and make them look cool. I don't know. It was something along those lines. But people talk about that a lot. And have I ever done that? Of course I've done that. I've been doing that since the dawn of computers, son. And it's not just with Linux. I mean, there are whole application suites and industries around making computers look awesome. For example, excuse me, holy moly. I have just got this, I'm going to mute for a second. I'm going to mute. Talk amongst yourselves about ricing. I'm back. Holy free holies. This cold thing is no joke. I've had a cough for the better part of a month. It's been going on for nearly 3 weeks now. And I just can't get rid of it. I was hoping. I'm going to drink some more. Holy moly. Brian, the show's not live. You could pause the recording and stitch it together later. I could. That's a good point. But then you wouldn't get to watch Lunduke slowly die on camera. And that would really bum you out. Holy moly. Oh, yes. This one's going to win an award for sure. So yeah. Old Macintoshes were big on that. Stardock Software made a big name for itself with things like window blinds and whatnot. Kaleidoscope, I believe that was over on the Macintosh for theming out your Macs and your Windows machines. And I mean, all these different companies And projects out there were just there to make your operating system be what you wanted it to look like and to make it look really cool, right? And I love that. I don't see any problem with any of that at all. I think if it's your machine, customize it. It's a part of you, you know? Like, it's not just a throwaway toy. Oh, man. Oh, that is ridiculous. At this point, a normal person would have stopped the show and just resumed after a coughing fit. But I'm not normal. So yeah, I do it all the time. Some machines I know I'm only going to have set up for a couple of weeks, and I don't worry about it. But most of my machines, my long-term machines, I trick out my systems as best I can because it's mine, you know? It's so important to do that, I think. Personally. And it's not just the little things like changing a desktop wallpaper to see it be like an oceanscape you find pretty. Like, I mean, it's the colors, it's the shapes, it's the themes, it's the icon sets, it's the font that is being used on the system. Yeah, I absolutely spend the time to customize my fonts. I don't typically use system fonts. I can't stand them. And it's not because they're not crazy high quality. I mean, the fonts that ship with things like Ubuntu or Elementary or many of the other Linux distributions are beautiful fonts. Beautiful fonts. But they're not me. They're not my fonts. And so I use a lot of fonts. There's a website called Blambot, which has fonts on there. It's by a guy who does fantastic fonts because he does lettering, a lot of comic book lettering, and just beautiful fonts there. So I actually have paid licenses for a few of these. Not all of them are free. Take that with whatever you needed to. But the fonts are just so beautiful. It's such an important thing to me that I need them. I need them in my life. This font right here. The Lunduke Show font is a noir inspired font, and I love the style of that thing. It's just anyway. Fonts are a very important thing to me, and so I spend a lot of time on that. Maybe you call that ricing, maybe you wouldn't. I'm not really sure, but yeah, absolutely, I spend time on that. Brian F. also on Patreon asks, seriously though, how evil was that of Microsoft to allow? This is Wes. This is a question that came from two people that I felt like should be together. Wes says, seriously though, how evil was that of Microsoft to allow us to have private repositories for free? Damn, evil Microsoft, smiley face. This is in reference to, GitHub now being owned by Microsoft and changing their pricing model. So private repositories, which used to be a paid feature, are now for free. They didn't make it all like, it's not like they just made everything free. There's certain things that are a paid level and certain things that are not, but basic private repositories are now free. So they did that. Brian F. also put in the similar question. Do you think that allowing free private repositories on GitHub is a variant of embrace, extend, extinguish, trying to nudge people into a closed source mindset? I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, because if you think about it, the thing they changed here was keeping code private. Now is free instead of a paid service, right? So one way you could look at it is Microsoft's giving more away in terms of code hosting services. Well, that's good, I guess. And then the other way is that Microsoft is enticing people and incentivizing people to keep their code closed and not publicly available. Technically, both are true. So I kind of got to leave it to an exercise to the reader to figure out how that one is actually going to play out. I don't know if I'd say this is an element of embrace, extend, extinguish. I don't know if I'd go that far. What I would say is that it is probably someone internally at Microsoft was sitting in a meeting and like, how can we show that we're really benevolent and nice now that we're taking over the GitHub? And someone came up with the idea of, well, let's make some of the paid services free, right? I don't know that they necessarily thought it through much past that. having been in a number of such meetings at Microsoft, I can attest to the fact that they did not necessarily always think things through all that far. I'll just leave it at that. The Linux Gamer, hey buddy, asks, what do you think are the major challenges that free and open source software will face in 2019? That's simple. Getting over this cough. I think that's going to be one of the biggest ones that's going to stay with us. I mean, we're into the second week of January. We're near the end of the second week of January. That's still with me. But free and open source software, honestly, I think there's going to be a couple of problems. All right. I gotta shift my position in the chair a little bit here, because this one's actually kind of a serious thing. I think there's a few problems, and I'm going to list off the ones I think are going to hit us the hardest and be the hardest to work through over the course of the year. The first is the atmosphere amongst the community. It is, I hate using the word toxic because it's a very loaded word from a lot of people who use it in various ways, and some other people take it in various ways, but it doesn't smell good right now. There are significant portions of the Linux, open source, free software world that are amazing. Loving, kind, caring places where people build really cool stuff. And that's the part I like. There are other chunks of it that are very angry right now and very mean-spirited right now. And those sorts of things aren't brand new. There's always been those sorts of elements in any sufficiently large community. That's just a way things are. Right now, it's real bad. That doesn't mean the sky is falling. That doesn't mean we're doomed. Nor does it mean that any of the angry, kind of mean-acting people are bad people. It doesn't mean any of that. In fact, right now, I think you can make a really good argument. And I when I'm referring to this, when I'm saying all this here, I'm not referring to any one incident, thing, document, person, etc. It's really, it's widespread. It's different thoughts and ideologies and approaches and people and groups and things. It's all over the map. This really isn't applying to any one thing. However, what I have seen, well, let's take one example as one of the more prominent, obvious examples, the Linux kernel code of conduct stuff. As an example here. I did not see, and I talked to a lot of people who had very strong opinions on that on many different sides. And I didn't talk to anyone who struck me as a bad person. Everyone seemed to have their own concerns, and everyone seemed to just want to do what was best for everybody. But the ideas of what was best for everybody was significantly different than other people's ideas. I'm not going to get into all that, other than to say it's at least a little heartwarming to know that people are still genuinely good deep down, and I think more importantly, genuinely nerds deep down. That's important to me. I can't help it. And so I think that in the end, people come back together. I don't think 2019 is going to be easy in this regard. 2018 is going to seem like a calm, non-turbulent, happy, everyone gets along year compared to, I think, what's about to happen in the open source free software world in 2019. We've seen recently there was a push towards kind of boycotting Richard Stallman of the Free Software Foundation at conferences, and not like a full-on boycott, but there's been a big push towards amending codes of conduct and rules and whatnot around the Free Software Foundation's conference, because many people feel like Richard Stallman violates all of those, and they don't want him there, or they don't feel safe with him there, etc. And you're seeing an increasingly large number of people who are prominent, semi-prominent, or not prominent, but being amplified members of the community, coders and the like, who are speaking out against people like Richard Stallman, Theodore So, Linus Torvalds, everybody, right? I think that wave is only beginning. And it's a little bit terrifying, but I know that it's a wave. And when a wave hits you, it hits hard. But then it pulls back and it goes away and it's done. So we just need to weather it, be kind to each other, and try and be nice to each other. And hopefully we can calm everything down and kind of ease everyone back away from the triggers and just relax a little bit. I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of success. I can preach, acceptance of thy fellow nerd nonstop until I'm blue in the face, and that's only going to impact a small number of us. But I still think it's worthwhile. So I think that's going to be probably the biggest thing facing us. The second biggest thing is corporate buyout season is at hand. So in 2018, Red Hat and IBM, bam, SUSE gets sold off from Micro Focus to EQT Partners, who owns they're an investment firm that owns a large number of companies, mostly over in Europe. Like I think, do they own like Wellington or something like that? Anyway, some like boots manufacturers and banks and things like that. And a few IT shops as well, and now SUSE. And you're looking at things like GitHub. Got purchased by Microsoft, and what's going to happen with Canonical. And so many of these purchases are really taking effect in 2019. Starting from now through the remainder of 2019, we're going to see not just those acquisitions take full effect, but we're going to see what the results of those are as the months and quarters drag on. We really are not 100% certain, nobody really is, of how the acquisition of Red Hat by IBM is going to go. Nobody's really certain of what's going to happen when SUSE is owned by an investment firm, by EQT Partners. We really don't know that. We really don't know what's going to happen with GitHub and Microsoft. Like there's just so many things, and there's so many questions. It's going to make people nervous, and there's inevitably going to be some people that are unhappy with some of the results. Even if those results are overwhelmingly positive, there's going to be some changes along the way. And I think those are going to be really, really difficult this coming year. I don't think there's any way around it. I think the hard part for folks like us who just enjoy free software, maybe contribute to a few projects. I do videos and I write articles and things like that. And I'm just going to be sitting here and going to conferences and talking to people and watching it happen. And it's hard because there's not really a whole lot most of us can do to alter the course of history as it's about to unfold. But how we leave 2019, well, it's pretty up in the air at this point. So I'm actually a little bit concerned. Short term, long term though, I think we're going to be fine. I think we'll weather it all and we'll come out the other side, hopefully before too long, and be right as rain. Alexander over on Patreon asks, innovative thinking in the FOSS world? Do we have any? I mean, many cool projects are triggered by products from closed source companies. That is true. It seems like we, FOSS people, are always trying to copy or mimic existing software, not talking about operating system or development environment or desktop environment here. I agree. Many of the desktop environments on the Linux side are truly unique compared to their closed source counterparts. What is it in your opinion? So Alexander, yes, you are kind of right. I mean, that's how we got started in free software. I mean, Richard Stallman literally posted to a news group announcing his intention, was it like on Thanksgiving or something like that, that he was going to write the GNU system and he was going to get some help with it, and it was going to be free and open source, and it was basically going to be replacements for existing Unix software and a Unix system, right? It was take what we already have, but make it free. And that trend has continued. I mean, when that's where we start, it's very difficult to get to the point where we're significantly out in front of it. However, I will say that it's not just the underlying operating system and desktop environment components. I would posit to say that some of the most significant advancement in server technology, as well as in the embedded field and for embedded operating systems, has been pretty significant in the free and open source software side by comparison to the closed source side. So there are significant areas where we do, in the open source world and the free software world, I hate to use the word, but innovate. We innovate where many of the closed source folks don't. And that's because we've gotten so significantly ahead in those areas. Now, in, let's say, like video gaming, right? Well, we're mostly just porting software or emulating software from other platforms most of the time. I mean, we do have a lot of Linux native, but you don't really see the driving force for full creativity in the gaming world doesn't really reside within the open source side of things, right? So you are in part right, and that has historically been the way it has always been. That said, you can also flip that on its head. If you look at some of the main features of, say, Mac OS or Windows, they tend to trail behind Linux in many areas. Virtual desktops, I mean, that by itself is a pretty big one. And a lot of other functionality too, which is escaping me right now. I actually did an article on this many, many years back, I think for Network World, where I looked at some of the cool features that other operating systems stole, not from Linux necessarily, but from other earlier systems. Floating docks, like everyone thinks like that dock at the bottom of Mac OS 10. Apple didn't create that. The earliest incarnation I can find of that old dock, I'm not sure, because that old dock kind of like that, it was floating, was in CDE, the common desktop environment, as well as a few graphical environments before then. But the old RISC OS, the old Acorn system, had that dock along the bottom, and lots of other systems did, and the Macs got it far, far later. So no matter which system you look at, no matter which ecosystem you look at, they're always going to lag behind someone else in some way. So yeah, I think in certain areas we do lag behind. We tend to copy functionality from some of the closed source folks, but the closed source folks also copy a lot of functionality from us. So I'll take what I can get. At least my code's free. Keith asks, you ever get the urge to build a custom 486 and play some sweet closed source DOS games every day, Keith? Every friggin' day. And I don't fight it either. Oh man, I do love a good 486. One of my favorite PCs of all time was a 486 DX2 66 megahertz machine. I loved that machine. Pre-Pentium, but like about as beefy as you're gonna get computer-wise without being a Pentium processor, right? Like in terms of, x86 architecture. So coming right up to that line, and oh man, the sweet DOS games I could play. In fact, I still play DOS games on the regular. I do have an old Android tablet that is running an outdated version of Copperhead OS on it, and I have DOSBox on there, and I play DOS games on that all the time. That is, that's primarily how I play games, is old DOS games. I really don't see a problem with going back in time and grabbing old closed source games and playing them. I don't see that as a bad thing. Like it does remind me whenever I do that. I'm like, man, I don't have the code for this one. I do think about that, but I don't really feel bad about it. And I don't feel hurt by it. Those are isolated, encapsulated moments in time. It's almost like looking in a history at a, oh man. It's like being in a museum and looking at a historical document or a piece of art. You know what I mean? Those old closed source DOS games, I'm cool with them. Let her rip. As long as they're not wrapped up in some crazy DRM, I'm happy. Whoa. I tell you, man. Hey, if I can get through this show with only 2 coughing fits, I'm doing pretty good. But yeah. Oh, man. All the time, dude. I tell you, though, Keith, what I would really like would be and I've talked about this before probably. I love a good handheld, right? I would love a palm top size machine, or something like the Dragon Box Pyra, or something like that. Palm top, flip it up, maybe like a roller ball or a nub mouse with a little touch typing keyboard, physical keyboard, that was running like an old 386 or a 486 or something like that. Especially if I could get like an Ad-Lib or Sound Blaster chip, a sound card in there, a little Yamaha chip. I would love that. Just to load FreeDOS, which is a nice GPL open free software MS-DOS compatible operating system. It's awesome. Kudos to Jim Hall and the team for that one. And just play some old games on the go. I would love a little handheld like that. I'd love it so much. Hot diggity dog. Tice asks, I'm storing my passwords on LastPass. Okay. I would like to store my passwords myself. Of course you would. I know of KeePass and GPG, but I don't know much about them. What are your thoughts about these two? And do you know of other options worth considering? Okay. There's many ways to go with password management. We've talked about it in the past, but it's been a while. Here's my personal recommendations. Many people are going to disagree with me on this, and they're going to have extremely valid points about disagreeing with me on this. But I do not like using any online password service because you will become a target. You become part of a big target for people to hack into it. And I don't like that. I also don't like anyone else having my passwords. And yes, I hear many of you immediately screaming in their heads to saying, but it's encrypted on the servers. They don't have your passwords. I know. But it's technology. There's ways around everything. In the name of Ian Malcolm, in the words of Ian Malcolm, life will find a way. So I don't like having my passwords in any sort of LastPass or any sort of password service. I've done it before. I've done it with Google. I've done it with LastPass, and I don't anymore. I store all my passwords myself. I do them in an encrypted text file. And make it nice and simple. However, LastPassX is great. Whoa, I've got a frog in my throat. Holy. Here's what I like about LastPassX. Man. LastPassX, you put all your files into a little database file. It encrypts it. You store a singular file. You copy it wherever you want to keep it. So you can keep an offline copy, put it on a thumb drive, put it in a safe. Keep your other one, only on your person in an encrypted sort of storage solution on your Nextcloud server, an encrypted volume, something like that. That's a great way to go. I love that as a solution because you get a nice application as part of it for browsing and editing and working with all your passwords and all that. And it's not sitting up on someone else's server where they could potentially read it. I like text files. I've always liked text files. I grew up on text files. I don't think I'm ever going to be anything but a text file kind of guy. I like being able to drop into the shell and use whatever text editor I want to edit my articles that I write, or my passwords, or my to-do lists, or my calendars. It's just the kind of guy I am. So I like text files. I have a password text file that I've been keeping, literally the same file. I mean, it's been updated because I keep updating it, but it's been the same file probably 30 years, maybe 25 years, 25 years. Yeah. So it'd be the mid 90s, about the mid 90s. I was on that 486 DX266. I had a text file, and I kept it on a floppy disk. What can I say? I was young. I kept it on a floppy disk, and I just kept that moving forward. It's the same password file. It's called pass.txt. That's what it always was. That's what I like to do, Tice. Veritanuda asks, about 4 to 5 years ago, Android media sticks, I remember those, became a thing, and you could buy dozens of them. Yeah, you could. And I bought a few myself. I bought one too. But they were totally a waste of time. I agree. Not only were they uglier than Cody, I agree on that too. Man, you were just speaking my language today, Veritanuda. They were very limited in their functionality, and it was mostly all about streaming services, which were all broken a year after buying the devices. Yes. I only keep them around for potential hacking purposes now, as they have failed utterly to be even moderately useful. Do you have a similar experience with something you were excited about getting but disappointed about using? Well, that example is a good one. On that same token, Android TV or Google TV. I got a back before I decided that Google had way too many tentacles into my life. I was like, man, okay. I've been using things like I had a modded Xbox, or I had an old Myth TV Linux-based media center for a while, and I thought, was it Sony, I believe, came out with a Google TV. It was based on Android media center box, and it had some of the streaming services on it, and it had some applications for playing like video files and music files and whatnot off of your local network. And I'm like, yeah, let's give this a spin. This seems like it could be a good idea. Polished up by Sony and Google. It could be great. It was garbage. Slow UI, clunky, crashy, awful. I mean, it was just bloated. It was a bloated piece of garbage. The applications that ran on top of it were even worse than the bloated, crashy, awful looking, just terrible operating system. And they just crashed constantly. They'd get updated and they'd remove features, and then 6 months in, half of the streaming services would decide, I'm not going to support that platform anymore, and you just can't even use it for anything but playing local files, which never worked all that well in the first place, and had a hard time, struggled with even just simple video files. It was just awful. It was the worst. It was the worst, man. Oh, it was just awful. So everything along those lines. Honestly, so much in the Android and Google ecosystem I find disappointing when I get into it. I invest into it, and then I'm like, oh, why did I do that? That was the biggest thing for me, at least in recent years. In fact, I think I wrote an article for Network World along the lines of how Google TV almost ruined my marriage, or something like that, which was a little tongue-in-cheek, because it didn't actually almost ruin my marriage, but man, my wife got pissed off at it too. Like, she was like gonna like chuck this thing through the window. She's like, this is a piece of garbage. And it was the worst. As for like other things, specifically looking at pieces of technology, like computers and the like, yeah, another Google thing, Chromebooks in general. And I know this is an opinion that so many of my friends don't hold, but I find the whole experience with Chromebooks astoundingly annoying. I found them annoying when they first came out, and you couldn't really do anything but browse the web on one web browser with them. And I find them annoying now. I've got an Acer Chromebook, and I don't really use it other than when they announced the Linux support, so you could run Linux applications on Chrome OS. I'm like, that's cool. I got to try that out, right? So I tried it out, and it seemed to be working. And I'm like, hey, cool. All right, well, if nothing else, this is kind of an underpowered but good battery life and cheap laptop that I can load up with, I don't know, LibreOffice and, I don't know, work occasionally on. Like not something I do all the time, but occasionally I could, right? And so I'm like, okay, all right, I don't really like how spy this device is, but it's got that going for it. So I put it off to the side, and then I opened it up the other day, and the whole Linux subsystem part just stopped working. It just doesn't work anymore. Can't possibly figure out for the life of me why. I did nothing to it. Google did a Chrome OS update, and now I can't launch any applications that I had already previously installed, or mount the whole directory or folder where all my files are stored. So the one file I was working on, which I hadn't done a whole lot with anyway, because I hadn't really used the device much, that's just lost. I just put it off to the side. Maybe I'll figure it out later. But I find constantly the experience underwhelming, disappointing, kind of slightly annoying, just constantly. But yeah, so Google disappoints me. Oh, as we toggle over to email questions, this episode is brought to you by Purism. They did not specifically request that I cough halfway through half of this episode, but I did it anyway. Free bonus, everybody. If you go to Purism's website, I feel like I already talked about Purism, but it wasn't part of a sponsorship. It was just because it just made sense to talk about them. They make good laptops, and they're making a phone, and they love free software and open hardware and all that. Go over to Purism's website, puri.sm, specifically the phone. It's friggin' awesome looking. They've got, and this is the coolest part, if you go over there, they've got like a blog going on where they update all the cool things that are happening with the phone, like as they're building it, from the hardware to the software to how they're doing it, to why they're making the designs. So interesting to read through. Even if you're thinking, I don't want that phone, still go read it. It's so interesting. Go to Purism. As you slowly watch Lunduk fall apart, let's answer some more questions. Oh, I can do this. So I'm recording this on Saturday night. It's a Thursday show, right? And on Thursday, I didn't have any conflict or anything, but I was just coughing constantly. And I'm like, oh man, I got to do a show, but and there's some great questions this week, but oh man, and it's all prepared. I got the slides already. I'll just wait a day. I'll wait till Friday, and I'll record it on Friday, and then I won't cough so much, right? I'll take some NyQuil. We'll see how that goes. Nope. Cough didn't get any worse, but didn't get any better. I've been to the doctor, everything. I'm fine. It's just a lingering cough. No big deal. My daughter had a lingering cough. Same one. She gave it to me. Hers is better now. And going by her current trajectory, mine will be better like sometime early next week. But I thought, I'll do it Friday. Didn't get any better. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll definitely be better then. Still not better. So I'm like, well, I got to do it. And what the heck? Here we go. Some anonymous guy sent in via email to brian@lunduk.com. By the way, if you want to send in questions to me, I should make this clear. Via email, make sure you put in the subject line Linux Thursday. Put those words in the subject line. Otherwise, I'm probably going to miss them. I get hundreds of emails every day. I try my best to read them all. I don't. I don't manage to succeed, but I try really, really hard, everybody. And I reply to some of them, but I can't reply to them all. I just don't have the time. But if you want to make sure I see it and it goes into the running for the show, put Linux Thursday in the subject line. It gives you the best shot there. Also, if you go to the BBS and do the bbs.lunduk.com, there's a message base in the message menu specifically for Linux Thursday questions. Make sure you put it in that message section. Otherwise, no guarantees. I'll probably miss it. All right, some anonymous guy asks, 4 years ago, I was told at my employment that I had to run Windows. Ooh, brutal. I was cordial. But then I promptly formatted that drive and installed GNU/Linux, baby. Oh, I love your rebelliousness. No one has bothered me about it since. Do you know of people who have done the same? How did it go for them? And in parentheses, he adds, I think if the employer really insists, why not install Linux to an SSD, connect it by USB, and tap F12 when you arrive in the morning? This way, Windows can officially run on the computer, but the user can boot their own OS. So, yes, I think I would be surprised if the vast majority of Linux people, like people who want to use open source and free software, don't do this, at least occasionally, right? A Linux thumb drive or an external USB hard drive or something. Oh, that's just a common one. I did this when I was at Microsoft with multiple operating systems. I ran BOS and Linux when I was at Microsoft working specifically on Windows 2000. And I was not alone. Believe you me, I was not alone. And speaking of ricing your system, I was using my Windows 2000 main like administrative email machine at Microsoft at the time. Was running window blinds and this thing called Lightstep, which was this old package. Probably still around. I haven't used a Windows machine or a Mac machine or a new Mac machine in just years, so I don't really know. But it was basically, it made it look like Next Step or After Step. Just because I didn't want a Windows looking machine. I didn't want that. But yeah, I would be surprised if most people don't do this. I mean, thumb drives, what do they cost? Like, 11 cents per gigawatt. So you get a decent, 64 gig or better thumb drive for nothing on Amazon, especially if you wait for like a sale. You're like $10 for like a 128 gig thumb drive sometimes. It's ridiculous. Throw a system on there and you're good to go. You can boot right off of that. And what's great is even if you have to run Windows, if you've got Windows on your main internal drive and you've got your Linux system or whatever on your external USB drive, etc., you can, if your machine's beefy enough, also have a virtual machine that points to either of those drives. So you can run one inside the other if you need to boot it up just for a moment as well. So yeah, man, everyone does that. Everyone does that. And you know what? I think most bosses are fine with it. Just keep it like secret, Keep it on the DL. It's one of those things that everyone accepts it, but don't rub it in the boss's face. You know what I mean? You got to keep it a little bit quiet. Also, I've seen the reverse happen though, where you're at a Linux company and everyone, this is not a joke, where you're at a Linux company, not naming names here. Would like to point out to everybody that I'm not naming names here. It could be a wide variety of companies that I'm talking about because I've seen inside of most of them. Linux companies, several of them have a lot of Windows machines and a lot of Macintoshes as standard. I've seen people in Linuxy companies want to use Linux, and I've seen managers kind of miffed that they wanted to use Linux. That's a real thing. Moving on. Jacob asks, I've been a huge fan of your shows and you for years. Keep up the good work. Jacob, I have been a huge fan of your messages all morning long. Please keep it up. That is a fantastic thing to say. Hypothetically speaking, what if you were the captain of the Starship Enterprise? I like where this is going. What distro of Linux would the main computer run? Okay, so if we're not running, full LCARs on the Enterprise, and we're running a distribution of Linux, and Linux is what I'm going with. Oh man, what do you want? A giant starship in space running? Honestly, cubes. I'd go cube, and then part of me wants to give a joke answer here, like, Hannah Montana in space or something like that, right? But realistically, you want it set up so that there's a centralized server. So you basically got an individual server that everyone logs into, right? Whether it's SSH or desktops or whatever, or forwarded X11 sessions, doesn't matter. And everyone needs to be able to use that same system. You need to make sure that everything is really well isolated. Otherwise, you'll end up with one of those episodes where a virus gets into the system and everyone dies, right? But if cubes, every application is running in its own little virtual machiney sandbox. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it in this scenario. Everyone logging in is not only in their own little sandbox, but every application is also inside of that. So if there is a problem, if someone does sneak in a little, Andorran virus or whatever, it's only going to take out one application, maybe one database. Then you're good to go. That's what you do. Either that or Hannah Montana Linux. Daniel asks, sometimes It seems that in the open source world, we fall too often in we have too many package managers. Let's create one that solves all the use cases. And whoops, we now have one more package manager to deal with issue. Yes, we do. We do that all the time. And sometimes it just feels like people could work together to provide a single and better solution. In your opinion, do you think that we as a community really need so many similar solutions to the same problems? And couldn't the open source ecosystem benefit more of having people work towards a single and better solution than from innovating through fragmentation? What you say makes sense. But here's this. While you're right, we do tend to say, oh, there's a problem with ALSA as a sound server. Well, let me create 3 new sound servers. Here's Pulse, and here's Jack, and here's whatever the one from the KDE guys was, Photon, whatever it was. And so, we'll just keep throwing new sound servers at it. Oh, the new display servers. We'll throw a couple more at it. Oh, package managers is the worst, man. There's package managers on top of package managers. It's just ridiculous. And so, yes, it is fragmented like nobody's business. However, that's not a unique phenomenon to open source in any way, shape, or form. In fact, most of the biggest strides in computing history have come from highly fragmented marketplaces. Let's go back in time. So look at the early 1980s, early to mid 1980s, right? So you're sitting in the early mid 80s and you're using a computer. Is it a Commodore? Is it an Atari? Is it an Apple? Is it an IBM? Like, what is it? Is it an Amstrad? Like, there's so many. Do you have a Beeb? What do you have? 99% chance. That's a made up stat, but pretty good odds. It's not compatible with hardly any other computer systems. Slightly different or very different operating systems, different chipsets. A lot of times, even the storage mediums weren't compatible with each other. Even if you had a 5 1/4 inch floppy, you were not guaranteed, not by a long shot, that floppy was going to work in a floppy drive of a different machine, even if it seemed like it should. Even if the sizes were the same, you still weren't guaranteed because the way they stored data on disks was different from machine to machine, even if it was the same physical media. That is, and we're not just talking like real high level file system-y stuff, like whole concepts changed. And so, but just the same, throughout those years, when we hit to the Amigas, the Atari 2GSs, the Macintoshes, and the early but better IBM machines as they started to add more graphical capabilities. I mean, there were so many areas that were being pushed forward in really exciting ways, in different ways. They tried new and different things all the time to see what worked. And in the end, you're still stuck with maybe not all of the systems being prevalent, but maybe a couple of them, right? So it's like with package managers now. How many package managers are out there? I don't know. 8 billion for all I know. I know there's a ton of them that the vast majority of people have never used, and I hardly ever use or haven't used in a decade or more, right? There's a ton of them, but mostly it comes down to a handful of, I'm using apt or, zipper or Pac-Man or maybe like a half dozen, maybe like 6 or 7, right? Of really commonly used ones, but there's way more than that in actual existence. It's like that in the computer world too. In raw computer unique architectures, we're not just talking about 2 or 3. We're talking about dozens upon dozens upon dozens of commercially released, supported, and widely used computer platforms that are wildly different. Not just, oh, this looks a little different, which is where we're at nowadays with most commodity PC, like Apple Macintoshes versus a Dell PC running Windows 10 are hardware-wise nearly identical. If you took all the logos and the copyright symbols off all of them, it's very rare that you're going to find one or two of them where you're not like, I don't even know who made this, right? It's the same. They're all the same. Back in those days, they were wildly different. And a couple of them emerged as the most popular. And as time went on, we kind of whittled it down. And that's what we see nowadays. We're still getting some new package managers, but we also have whittled down into a core set of focused package managers that have the most success. The reality is, as much as news it gets talked about things like Snappy or Flatpak or whatnot, the most used ones, really, we're talking apt and zipper, realistically. Let's open it up a little bit broader. Debian and RPM, right? Debs and RPMs. That's what it really comes down to right now. And that's not a lot. That's really not as much fragmentation as it seems like at first. It's more, it might make sense for us to focus all in on one. And yeah, that might help. But realistically, do we really need more people working on tools to handle RPM files? I don't think we do, actually. There comes a point where throwing more engineers at a singular idea or a singular project doesn't actually make things go any faster. In fact, in some cases, it can move things back. It's the whole mythical man month idea. For those of you who haven't read that, there's a book called The Mythical Man Month. There's an idea. You can just look it up on Wikipedia and get the synopsis. But basically, it's that. If you throw more men, throw more women, throw more whoever, more engineers at a project, you don't necessarily make it happen faster or get more features out of it. A lot of times, one person sitting in an office, undistracted from people, can create something that, a whole team of 1,000 engineers have a difficult time making because there was just too many of them. So for me personally, I would rather see more projects. Yikes. Man, this cough is going nonstop. I try to mute it for you guys when I remember. I would like to see more projects. There are problems with fragmentation. There's problems with and issues that arise, and they're significant ones, like, developers, ISVs having to support multiple formats and multiple standards is difficult. It takes more time, takes more energy, and in some cases it becomes a real roadblock. However, I would rather see that happen than to only have one choice. I like having multiple choices, and that's, to me, part of what makes Linux awesome. So I think we're okay. I think we're really and truly okay. The systems we have nowadays are awesome. Good odds that Linux system in front of you, and there probably is one, is awesome. The things it's capable of doing are off the charts cool and highly competitive with any closed source system out there. Highly competitive. Boy, am I glad I muted it for that one. I hope I did. I sounded like I was dying. Jeezy, crazy. But yeah, I love fragmentation. I think there should be more fragmentation. I want to see more fragmentation in hardware. I want to see more fragmentation in software. I'm all for it, 100%. Sometimes, until I get cranky about it. If you would like to send in questions, you know where to do it. We talked about it during the rest of the show. If you would like to help fund the show, keep the show going, you can contribute over at lunduke.com. That's like the PayPals and the credit cards and the stuff. We also have the Patreon that you can subscribe to. You can get the MP3 podcast feed for free over at lunduke.com. There's a little RSS feed there. If you would like to watch this show, the video show, not on YouTube, you got two options as of right now. One is that you can do it for free over on LBRY. Library is this kind of decentralized blockchain-y platform. It's very, very cool. I've got links up on the website there. Or if you subscribe via Patreon, you get an RSS feed where you can download the DRM-free MP4 files when the show comes out. Also, if you would like to get my articles, which have zero me coughing in them, not a little bit, not even a little bit. I edit that out. I'm typing along. I'm like, the duck ran slow, cough, cough, cough. And then I backspace, Control H, and take care of all that for you. Go over to linuxjournal.com. I'm the deputy editor over there. And you can also subscribe on YouTube. YouTube's fine too. All right. I'm going to go take more NyQuil. This was a delightful evening. I will see you guys later.